Well, welcome to another episode of the Freedom Filled Life. Today we're at the Scottsboro Depot, and we just decided, since it was open on Friday and today is Friday, I thought we'd come in and take a look at it and see what was going on here. And it's definitely an interesting little building. If you've got a few minutes of time and you want to learn some history, this is definitely a good place to learn the history.
All up around here, because this was the Memphis and Charleston, so it was the backbone of the Confederacy, and there was a lot of interest. And we have a map in here that shows you where they were deployed. In fact, we have a board member who collects all the letters he can find that mention Jackson County, and they're mostly Union soldiers who were deployed here. So this man wrote home to his family, and where is it? Must be over here now. Somebody put this one back up backwards. Yeah, here we go. This is a man writing his parents, and let's see. His name is Warner, and he is with the 26th Illinois.
Okay.
And here is the depot, and here's the train track, and here's where all of the different units were deployed.
Which are all described on that sign out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how we know, actually, this is more detail than we get from the ORs, about who was here when. So he's writing, this is 1864, not too long before the end, and this is where everybody's deployed, and they're protecting this railroad. They were always retaking it, and then the South would take it, and if the Union was using it, the South would tear it up, and if the South was using it, the Union would tear it up. And so it was, there's a big field you can see over here when you walk outside, and that's where this group was.
Okay.
And the funny thing about that was, when they moved in that field, it was just covered in boulders, and they had to move rock loads out for 5 days before they could even put their tents down. And what they did was, if you get on Google Earth today, you can still see that crevice over there and that whole pile of rocks there that the Union Army, and when that man farms that field, I think about, well, wasn't it nice for the Union Army to clear it for him? So these are all kinds of letters. There was a man who was a historian from Auburn who came here and had a fit over these letters. We had to copy all of them for him. I keep thinking if we get enough of them, we'll publish the facsimile and then the translation and put out a little book of them, because they really are fascinating.
Very
I mean,
interesting.
they're just all along here. He buys them off of eBay. He's the same guy who is our metal detector. And in fact, all these things right here were detected from the yard around the depot. He picked all those up for us.
Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, it's a very historic old area. There was a skirmish in you read about that, about the 110th and 111th Colored Infantry defending this. There were 3 attacks, and the last one was so fierce they finally left. And but they lost 2 or 3 of their new black soldiers in there, and the trouble was they got them to Larkinsville, and the Union Army doctors wouldn't treat them.
Oh.
Because they were black.
That's
Isn't that
awful. That is awful.
Yeah, so they refused to treat them. So it took, one of them died just simply because he couldn't get treatment, and then one lost a leg. I mean, it was they really valiantly, for men who had just been picking cotton, they did a valiant job defending the depot stuff. We got a light off of a locomotive and some old Union weaponry, some cannonballs and things. We've got artifacts from the Company B. Company B has a real neat story. They were a Korean company. Mark Scott Skelton and Charles Bradford both went off to World War II. They were just young men. They got pinned down by the Germans. And the commander called and he said, hey, we're about to be captured. We got to get out of here. And they said, oh, no, stand your ground. And they captured him, and they spent the whole war in prison camps. And Charles came back weighing 85 pounds. But he came back, and the county was just so poor in 1946, 47, that they set up a National Guard unit, and they encouraged all the kids to join. Because they had just had a war, right? There wasn't going to be another war. So they set this up, and sure enough, they recruited all these high school kids, about 162 of them, I think there were. And along comes the Korean War. And they're going to send all those children over there. And they tell Mark, Scott, and Charles, you don't have to go because you've already been prisoners of war in World War II. And they said, we're not going to send those boys over there by themselves. So this same thing happened. They were pinned down again. This time they were by the Chinese in North Korea. And they were just engineers. They were fixing bridges. So this time Charles picks up the phone and he calls and he says, hey, we're about to be killed or captured. And they said, no, you stay there and you defend that. So there's like 162 of them and 5,000 Chinese. And they say, oh, no, you stay there. And he says, hello? I think we got a bad connection here. Hello? And so he acts like he can't hear them, and he takes them and he moves them. And because of that, a whole generation of men around here lived that would not have lived otherwise. They had the biggest party.
I think I actually
until they all died.
I think I actually read that on the sign over at the Scott Cemetery.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, they see that's Mark Scott and Charles Bradford, they were the best of friends for years. Yeah, but they did, and those kids came back, and there's just whole big records of their parties, that they had every year. And the Army, of course, was mad as hell at Charles, and they were going to take his commission away and do all kinds of stuff, and they wanted the Company B put a monument up to him, But anyway, that's that sort. We have a model of how Scottsboro used to look. It grew up. It was incorporated in 1870, but it was a town before that. And they moved the county seat here because it used to be at Bellefonte, which is down where the nuclear plant is. Mm-hmm. It was on Bellefonte Island. And the Union Army quartered there, and they just burned. They pulled all the records out and burned them to keep warm in the summer and the winter, and just destroyed the town. So after the war, it never recovered, and Robert Scott owned a lot of stock in the railroad, and so did up here. If you go to Hollywood, so did Addison White, who was he was a salt provider. He had a salt mine up in Virginia. So the two of them said, hey, why don't we draw a line from my place to your place, and let's build Memphis in Charleston. So that's what they did. That is the longest straight stretch you can imagine. In fact, somebody said the longest straight stretch in the Southeast. Yeah, so the two of them moved here. So this is the depot, and so one of the high school classes built this for us. And so when it all grew up around here, the roads used to go right by here. And there's only one of these little cottages that remains down there, and I noticed it's marked to be torn down. But most of what was here is gone. 1881, we had a fire up here. There were 5 saloons. The newspaper said they couldn't find enough sober men to fight the fire. And so they lost a lot of this part of town in 1881. And when that happened, they began to move over here, because here's the courthouse.
Right.
So they built the first courthouse. This is our second courthouse. First courthouse burned 10 years after it was built. But they began to move to the center of town, and now everything is on the square. Now, most of the buildings that are there are second generation buildings. They were originally frame buildings, right, that burned or were torn down and replaced with brick. What do they call them? Brick, but brick office buildings, So town used to just really bustle, and now, of course, there's not much left in town. The parking situation is bad, and the old buildings are hard to tend to.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so they've leaked a lot, and so you really have to love the old buildings to locate downtown. Mostly the people who do it and have the money, people who have money do it, and it's the lawyers. So we put this up here because this is about where the cannonball hit. There's a nice house down here,
Okay.
the Maples house. That's where the cannon was. It was parked in their yard, and it hit here. And when it did, this is when they got in, because they just knocked out everything you can see patched here. And they had to give up then, but because everybody else's depot got burned, ours is brick. It was the first brick building in Scottsboro, and it's one of only 3 that remain. Us and the Memphis and Charleston in Huntsville, and the one down in Jacksonville. The 3 of those are pre-Civil War and still standing. So anyway, it's a nice old building. We're happy to have it. When they the Southern was going to tear it down, and somebody said, that's really a historic building, you should tear it down. So they said, fine, we'll deed it to the city if you can and then the city turned around and gave it to the Historical Association and said, if you can fix it up and use it,
We'll let you keep it.
You can't just let it sit there and be an eyesore, but if you'll fix it. So it took 10 years and all kinds of government grants to raise the money to fix this depot. And we were working, we had 2 depots. We had a passenger depot that's a little further down here. If you follow the railroad track about, not far at all, behind Tokyo, Japan, you can see where the old platform used to be, and that was the passenger depot. They built it in 1891, but they quit having passenger service in 1964. So they were going to tear it down, and one of the lawyers in town bought it and moved it. We offered it to Smithsonian, because it was beautiful. Everybody who can paint or knit or anything has done pictures of that depot. In fact, Alfred Eisenstadt photographed it for Life magazine.
Interesting.
Yeah, so anyway, it was a beautiful old building, but it's been gone. So this one looks like a passenger waiting room, and it was for years, from 1862 to 1895. That was the waiting room. And this was all freight, so you had the big doors. People would unload from the railroad track, and they'd slide them open. They'd bring things in here, and over here you can find out if you weigh as much as a bale of cotton. And I think we get it calibrated, but the kids play with it. And then you open the back door and just push it right out on a wagon,
Makes sense.
Yeah, so anyway, it's a nice little town with a lot of old history. And it's not old history if you go to Europe, you find out we're just not. This is a gem ledger. Shows you how when you bring stuff in, every line has all these different little things. Well, the first number is you pull up and you weigh your wagon with all the cotton on it, and then you empty the wagon and you weigh the cotton. You weigh the wagon and you get how much cotton you had, and then you take all the seeds out and you find out how much here, and then you break that up to the people who get cotton, now we got one over here that's got a whole handle in it. But suppose you got two railroad cars and they're this far apart and you want to join them. Well, you take this sucker, which has incredible leverage, and you put it up under the wheel, and you can move an entire railroad car this far. Now, you wouldn't want to do that for a long time, but you can do that. And so that's a railroad jack.
Okay.
So anyway, holler at me. Oh, I was going to tell you about this floor. So when we started renovating this, the insurance agent walked in. She says, "Oh Lord, you're never going to have anybody in that building because they'll catch their heel in those cracks in the floor." But they sanded it and found out it's chestnut. It's a pretty floor, so we didn't want to tear it up or put tile over it or something like that. So what they did was take epoxy and all the shavings and plug the holes, so we have a log cabin floor.
That's nice. It's a nice floor.
Yeah, I love it. I would do anything before I would fool around scratch.
Oh, yes.
Across from the passenger depot, it's the big rail hotel. Went into business while a widow woman and 3 of her children opened it, And all kinds of people lived there, and it didn't close till maybe 1962, 63. And the big story about that is Nanny Bailey, who ran the Bailey Hotel, said that Teddy Roosevelt was coming through town on a train, and he was going to stop and eat dinner with Nanny Bailey. So she kills every chicken she's got, and she puts the big pot in the little one and does all this cooking and gets ready for the president. And by the time he gets there, his train is 3 hours late. And he just walks out and waves and keeps going. She must have fed fried chicken to the whole world.
Well, that was an interesting little visit. We learned a lot of the history about this depot and about the area in general. I really enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Come back and visit with us again on the next episode of The Freedom Field Life. And like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.